Okay, and welcome back. Hour number 3. It's Monday, and that means, as you know, our Fukushima update with Yoichi Shimatsu to his friends Yoichi. All right, now, if you look at the front page, some strange roaring in the background there. There's at the top of Rense, there's excuse me, I have a little bit of a sore throat today. At the top of Rense is a graph, and it shows annual precipitation in California. And you'll see year by year from 1970 on, your rain ranges anywhere from, I think the low is about 12 inches up to as high as 40 inches. That's a lot. We call it an average, I would suggest, around, if you look at the graph, around 20 inches a year. This year, in 2014, from last year's 16, 17 inches, it went down to virtually zero. Now, that's unprecedented. There's not anything else on the graph that comes even close. Do accidents, coincidences really happen anymore like this? This is a coincidence of enormous magnitude because, as you know, the San Joaquin and Sacramento valleys basically were deserts until they began to irrigate them. The coastal mountain range would stop some of the moisture, which would really break off and go right across the valley and stack up against the Sierra Nevada. It wouldn't rain in the valley that much. It would rain some. But the Sierra Nevada, of course, would produce the water to irrigate. That's what made the Central Valley bloom. No rain this year. Now, we have had some rain in the last couple of weeks, but that rain, as I suggested, would be subtropical. Indeed, was of subtropical origin, i.e., it didn't evaporate from heavily radioactive waters in the upper northwest Pacific. So, if you believe in weather control, you can entertain the concept that that enormous high-pressure ridge out there was put up intentionally to prevent storm after storm after storm for month after month, about 2.5 months, from coming through and raining all up and down the west coast. Because why? It would have dumped radioactive nuclides all over the place, and the cat would have been out of the bag. Now, perhaps they just bought time, because next year the ocean's still radioactive. We'll see what happens next year. But for the moment, all we know is that in an unprecedented fashion, California and Oregon, southern Oregon, but certainly California, is absolutely dry as a bone. And this is just something you don't see. Yoichi, where are you?
Well, I'm in northern Thailand again. I'm sort of parked outside of a small farm spread that has solar power, which in Thailand, not the richest country in the world, but it shows there are people who are generating their own energy instead of relying on centralized power.
Yeah.
They're doing decentralized energy. It's faring very well. And this should have been the model if it wasn't so regulated and if it wasn't so controlled. And just following up on what you said, again, this is a indirect weather effect, where we have a fundamental weather effect of where there should be massive flooding all over the West Coast now because of highly active radioactive water coming across on the North Pacific Current, down the California Current. And this is the wet season in California. Usually if there's going to be a flood, if the LA River is ever going to fill, it would be now. It would have been a month ago. It's not happening at all. So this is a full-on drought. Obviously, something has stopped or blocked this highly active, very warm water that's coming across the Pacific, highly energized water, which should be causing storms in California now. Something is stopping that. And it's not a question of whether one believes in climate engineering or geoengineering, however you want to call it. It's not that much of a stretch. This is very ionized water in the atmosphere. It's very much electrified, in other words. So relatively easy to manipulate, especially from the large radio arrays up there in Alaska, outside Anchorage. The HARP project is really pretty much a no-brainer to manipulate a large front like that, a weather front, especially if it's electrified. A natural one would be much more difficult because that would just be wind and water. But this is highly reactive, charged with radionucleotides, which are very much prone to electromagnetism. Okay, so obviously some sort of weather manipulation, and why? Obviously, from geoengineering, we go to the political level. It would be, as you point out, very inconvenient for the powers that be, not just in the Washington, D.C., not just in California state or in the western states, but in terms of the whole global network of political power, okay? So this new paradigm that's coming up with the global elites acting in concert and maintaining this whole climate, political climate, media climate, of a news blackout about Fukushima and its weather effects. So this is what's happening.
Right.
California, the West Coast as a whole, a victim of this human manipulated drought, and a political decision has obviously been made that a drought is better than radiation on the coast, because if radiation would drive people out, millions of people out anyway, or shut down the economy, drive people out. Better that a drought drive people out. You try to hold off the radiation as long as you can, and then you can take over the world's most expensive property, the world's most desirable property along the west coast of the United States, and put it in the hands of the financial elite, okay, who would like to gain control of that and see the residents lose everything. Whether a resident owns beachfront property, whether that resident is a factory, or whether it's an inland farm, a dairy farm, or a vegetable farm, an artichoke farm, whatever they're growing out of vegetables, it's been a very prosperous, beautiful area, the most beautiful, prosperous area of the country. Why not seize it now? Use a drought instead of allowing radiation to wreck it where we couldn't inhabit it. And people will leave anyway with a drought or radiation. So let there be a drought to drive them out, and then let the financial, global elite financial interest take that over. And as long as they can hold it off, they can resell it again at an enormous profit.
Extending on that a little bit, if in fact this was a geoengineered drought to prevent radioactivity from falling all over the place and the snowpack in the Sierras and going on to the Rockies and east, which is where these storms would have gone, they're going to have to keep it up next year and the year after and the year after. And the only moisture that they're going to be allowed or able to let in here will be the subtropical storms that sweep up from Hawaii and areas to the east of the islands.
Yes, cutting across from the Caribbean up through Mexico, up the Pacific coast, and across. That's what they will allow in. But of course, that's insufficient.
Not enough. Correct.
California's fertility, productive, and the water supply, the drinking and bathing water.
Correct.
The water rationing will soon come in, and that will be the gradual strangulation of households and businesses across California, where people just aren't going to be able to take flushing the toilet once a day. You know, they're not going to be able to take that.
That's what. There's already talk.
Called voluntarily.
There's already talk over here of using what they call reclaimed water for drinking and household water. That means sewage water, as if they could actually clean it enough to get the pharmaceuticals completely out, the heavy metals, the toxins out, which they cannot. Reclaimed water is not drinkable. I don't care what they say. Well,
one of the greater threats, and again, I had this medical committee in Hong Kong, top medical researchers, top experts in their field. One of the things we should be really alarmed about are the hormone disruptors in water. Very difficult, very expensive to knock out the organics in recycled water. And the chief thing we should be worried about there are birth control pills. Birth control cycles for women's bodies.
Sure.
Massive amounts of estrogen there.
They're finding that.
The two-headed frogs, the hermaphroditic animals and frogs, and the growing feminization of men we're seeing, and also the obesity of women because of this massive amount of estrogen. This is artificially, produced pharmaceutical estrogen.
Correct.
In the water. This is going to build up, and it's going to be probably much too expensive for local communities to treat that with what we call nanocorticoids. to destroy those organics using pretty sophisticated technology. It'll be too expensive for most communities. And you know, these towns and suburbs are so sketched out that you cannot really centralize water. It's very, very, very difficult to centralize water for purification.
Now, you know...
So we're going to have...
You know a tremendous about cleaning water and trying to repurify it, and I've read articles and run articles about it, and it really is virtually impossible to clean that water sufficiently to call it clean drinking water. And what you're saying has been proven time and time again. The estrogen levels in streams, rivers, lakes, ponds is there. And there's nothing they can really do.
Yeah.
If they go to large scale rehabilitation of already used water, they're going to have a lot of sick people.
Yeah. So the answer for the elite, since the state of California has barely, the budget it's overstrained. The budget, it constantly risks default if anything. There's any kind of extraordinary expense. They cannot afford the cost of water treatment, of this kind of nano-forticide, of this very sophisticated treatment. So what will happen is that they'll have to turn to the private sector investors who will then raise the price of water massively. And you've seen something like this, if you recall, the James Bond movie, A Quantum of Solace, which is basically about the interest of people like George Soros, Philip the Rothschild, who are very intent on cornering the world drinking water market. Okay, they're investing in waterworks all over the world, and now the control of the water of the state of California, and let's say the other states, Washington, Oregon, would be their ideal. They can milk these people. The oil companies are taking you for a ride on petroleum products. Imagine how they can take you for a ride on water. You'll pay any price for water. Okay, and the rich people, they'll pay. To fill their swimming pools, they'll pay. So, and the poor people, we have no idea. The middle-class people, we have no idea how they'll cope when water works are privatized. And the processes, of course, will be very expensive. They can justify raising the prices of water at a retail level. The water will become a retail commodity. It will no longer be a public service.
Okay.
So if we look down the road at the effects of this geoengineering, and the root cause again is not just an evil plot, is rather this Fukushima radiation that's just barreling across the Pacific in the air, in the water, and that seems unstoppable. They found a temporary stopgap against it. I doubt if it'll last forever. But unfortunately, what's happening right now, they're cranking out also a lot of disinformation about, well, there's no El Nino now, but there will be next year. What you're seeing is a buildup of El Nino forces. This is absolute nonsense. This is, in other words, this is science after the fact. This is not science of what's going on, the science of what's happening. This is just pure speculation put out there as fact to delude people. And the newspapers and online news are running this absolute scientific nonsense, this gobbledygook, this total nonsense about a natural effect causing all this. Just as they're trying to explain, well, there must be some scientific explanation about, global warming melting the Arctic ice sheet for why there's massive, unprecedented snowstorms across Japan and across the United States and freezing temperatures in Europe are just killing dozens and dozens of people. They're concocting theories based on no evidence at all, or just totally misinterpreting any evidence that's there, and they don't want to face the fact that Fukushima has burned away the ozone layer over the Arctic, and the entire northern hemisphere is now vulnerable, not only to radiation from Fukushima, but cosmically solar bombardment of solar rays, just massive bombardment, which has basically destroyed the Arctic ice cap, and there will be hell to pay for decades to come for this. They don't want to face the fact that certain kinds of human technology, of just a few, we're not talking carbon dioxide here, we're talking about massive amounts of radiation, probably enough, let's say, if you were to bombard a planet in space with the levels that are, of the amount of uranium and plutonium in that's been released from Fukushima. If you were, let's say, to bombard a small planet that was living, with that, you drop bombs on there, you'll probably kill every life form there. So this is only, they're able to ignore this and keep this fact away from people because the release is gradual. It's not all of a sudden. If it was all of a sudden, everything would be dead right now. But eventually, these meltdowns are going to release sufficient amounts to, let's say, already cause, if not the entire extinction, the near extinction of vast species in the Pacific, and the human population, the killing years of a heart attack-induced death, the killing years in the history since 2011, that meltdown. In Japan, the two killing years in the United States, the killing year in American history, in which more than 25 million people died in 2011. So, this is the stuff they do not want to talk to the population about. Rather, they'll spin out these fantastical theories.
That's exactly what they're doing.
Out in California, why the temperatures are plummeting in Japan and in the United States. They don't want to look at the very obvious thing that we're all staring at. And people are afraid to look at. See, the common man, the average layman, doesn't want to look.
Denial.
Looking at the Medusa. It's like looking at the Medusa. They'll turn you to stone. When you start to think of the consequences of the extinction of humanity, this is a thought. I mean, I'm nearly paralyzed by that thought. I just don't, it's unimaginable consequences. It is a Medusa effect, and that's why you avert your eyes. You don't dare look at Fukushima. And the scientists aren't doing that. And the scary thing is the unanimity there. The fact that 99.99% of the scientific engineering, community of people who know the science, of the political leadership, of the bureaucracy, and not just in Japan and the United States, but all around the world, even in countries, let's say, like Germany and Switzerland, which are non-nuclear, dare not say what's really happening out there. They dare not face that. It's the Medusa effect. They don't face it because that means the end of their power over this planet, over the international community. It means that they are totally helpless. They cannot govern against the simple thing of mass extermination. They cannot provide essential, basic security to anyone on this planet against what's coming out of Fukushima. And this renders them powerless. So therefore, they must maintain this myth that these weather changes, there's some sort of aberration of nature and not an artifice of man. This is the myth that they maintain.
Well, it's nicely summed up.
I have to hand it to you, Jeff. You spotted this. You spotted this this electronic wall that's visible, is visible from satellite photos. You spotted this as an artificially induced barrier, electronic barrier. That it is obviously something like that just doesn't hold month after month after month. Weather is something that's turbulent, that's cyclonic. Everyone that knows the Earth turns and creates cyclonic motion. In other words, spiraling motion. It is impossible for a single straight right-angled wavefront to be maintained over the Pacific, off the coast of Hawaii for this long. That is a sheer impossibility of nature. It's never happened before. It cannot be natural. Nature does not operate like that. There's only one explanation, and we're close enough there to Alaska and the HAARP works there, the vast radio arrays there, which have been documented. This is not fantasy. The government itself admits that. Okay, the federal government admits itself that those facilities exist. Okay, so I think there's state senators in Alaska who've addressed this issue. There's people in the military who've talked about it. There's people in the energy industry who've talked about it. So this is not some phantasm. It's a real facility there, which has been active for decades. So what can you do? You put two and two together, you get the logical conclusion of what's happening. And the West Coast is basically going to be up for sale soon. Once the people evacuate, sell for less than a dime on the dollar. They may just lose everything, all their assets, when it becomes untenable. Basically, when the water comes down to a trickle, no one has to buy from you. You're going to leave. You're going to leave, basically. Sunshine and desert, you're going to be gone. And that real estate, someone will be able to declare this a dead zone and take it over. The state can take control of it and then hand it over to an auction, a bid, and someone would buy a low bid, and they would gain control over the Golden State. They'll gain control of it.
Mm-hmm.
This is what's in the works now. And what can we say? Democratic government, transparency, in official behavior. Is any of that happening? What has happened to democracy? And again, the Medusa effect. People cannot face radiation. It's something that's unseen, that you can't smell. They know is deadly. They know is long-lasting. They're as paralyzed as a rabbit looking at a python. Okay, that's how terrified most people are. They dare not look into a python's eyes, much less run. They can't jump away. A rabbit can easily jump away, but he just sits there paralyzed with that Medusa effect as a python slowly wraps its coil around the rabbit and crushes his bones.
Well, you've
bad situation, Jeff.
Painted quite an accurate picture in my mind. That's doesn't get any more correct than that. I do think that the evidence is clear. It's circumstantial, but that high pressure was so bizarre and happened for reasons that we have discussed that are so logical that you can't discount it. And I can't prove it. You can't prove it. There is no other explanation. I concur.
Show me another explanation. I mean, no one dares stand forward except an oncoming El Nino next year. In other words, we can't explain what's happening this year.
That's BS.
We'll suggest the cover up for next year, okay?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to...
The other problem...
Oh, hold on, Yoichi. We have to take a break. Yeah. Hold on.
Yeah. We got to talk about Tokyo, what's happening in Tokyo.
Yes, we will. All right, in just a couple minutes. By the way, I'm going to pull that story up where I documented for 3 weeks the high pressure system that was obviously engineered, in our view, off the coast of California, which prevented moisture from coming in and forced it to the north, up over Vancouver, into Canada, where it dropped a lot of moisture, picked up some more, and then came down into the Midwest, where they were getting some interesting readings in the snow in the Midwest. Background radiation times 2 and 3. Okay, we'll be right back in a minute. Hang on. Okay, and we're back. And just a quick note, we've got a story up about the latest projections of the Fukushima nuclear radiation in the Pacific Ocean, which are mixed in it like... And I saw somebody using my example of a cup of coffee when you pour cream in it. I thought that was kind of funny. I've been saying that for a couple of weeks now. Someone else picked it up. But it does illustrate the pollution aspect very well. Take a black cup of coffee, and you got some cream, which represents the radioactive discharge from Fukushima. Pour it in the coffee, stir it, and what do you got? Okay, it's not quite that dispersed because it only goes down to about 150 meters, but it does cover the vast majority of the North Pacific, and it is now, they estimate, within anywhere of 2 to 6 months away. It's still being projected. Take my word for it, the EPA knows where the bulk of it is and knows the rate at which it's moving toward the West Coast. There's a Chinese Journal of Ocean University of China, April 2014. They made this in the journal. It's published. We've got it up there posted so you can take a look. It's dated April of this year. The abstract reads, I'll just read a little bit of it. Based on, and there are maps showing the spread, exactly how it's going. Based on the statistics of surface drift data from 1979 to 2011 and the simulation of nuclear pollutant particulate movements simulated using high-quality ocean reanalysis surface current dataset, the transport pathways and impact strength of Fukushima nuclear pollutants in the North Pacific have been estimated. And their estimating is coming right over here. They mentioned the Kuroshio and the Kuroshio enhanced extension currents and the North Pacific Current. They've got a very good display here by way of their graphs. You can take a look at those, and you'll see where it's coming. It's coming. It's almost here. All right, Yoichi, go ahead, please. Tell us about Tokyo.
Yeah, it is, okay, first of all, the cream on the coffee image is great, but it's probably more like a cappuccino or froth on the...
Well, that's good. That takes care of the 150 meters. Right, agreed. We'll switch to the cappuccino example.
A highly active, hot froth, bubbly froth. That's what happens. The commentary I would have about the Chinese oceanographic report. Isn't it incredible that scientists in China are showing the science behind this? Yeah. Where is the American, where is the National Science Foundation of the United States of America? Where is the Canadian science establishment? Where are they? Or even of a state of Alaska or Washington or California or a municipality? Where are the Western scientists who believe in free inquiry, who believe in scientific independence, who believe in peer review, who believe government shouldn't be telling people what science is about? Where are they? Why does it have to be a team, a research team from China that presents the facts instead of a research team from the United States or Japan, for that matter? How sad. How sad scientific inquiry and intellectual freedom has fallen on either side of the Pacific in supposedly democratic countries that protect, free thought. How utterly pathetic and sad. Anyway, Tokyo. Readings of different people. Alarming readings. We've had, in the last 10 days, the largest amount of, rainfall probably in Japanese history. What the Japanese meteorologists have done and government has done is a trick to say, well, the first storm was among the largest. The second storm was the largest since the 1940s, but the combined is larger than anything in the past. Massive snow, not just across Tokyo, all across the Pacific coast of Japan up to the mountains. Amazing amounts of snow. And if you look at the wind pattern, okay, the Siberian high is blowing winds from Russia.
Okay, the Siberian high is blowing winds from Russia. Now, a high pressure system runs in a clockwise motion. Clockwise. Imagine a clock. Everybody's digitally now, but imagine an old-fashioned clock with an hour and a minute hand. It runs clockwise. That's what the Russian high pressure does. Clockwise. So as it comes up and over the top, now imagine this. You're going to come up on the left side, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. You come up and over the top, and that high pressure is sitting on eastern Russia, all right, and near the Kamchatka Peninsula. It's sweeping up the left side, over the top, and down the right side, and then all the way around. As it comes down the right side, you're going to find Japan in about the 5 o'clock position. So up over midnight, 1 o'clock, it's spinning down. So the point Yoichi was making is that it's picking it up on the upsweep, bringing it all the way around and down on Japan. And that basic push from Fukushima toward Tokyo would be off the Soviet high. It would run from about 3 o'clock on a clock, 4 or 5 o'clock, let's say Tokyo's 5 o'clock, Fukushima's at 3 o'clock. That high pressure system running clockwise pushes all the fallout, all the expulsion from Fukushima in the air and in the rain, right straight down in that clockwise sweep right into Tokyo. Okay, Yoichi, go ahead.
Thank you, Jeff, because you see exactly the same pattern. And as we're talking about the freedom of speech, of expression, of inquiry, we're cut off too. We're willing to speak out, but there we go. Shut down. Every time we mention something like this, for some reason, our phone signal is cut off.
You got
Come
it.
on, guys. And I have to tell these people in Washington and Arlington, and Fort Meade, hey, it's your children that are going to die, okay? So you better listen in cannot interrupt this anymore. It's your children and grandchildren who are going to die miserably and be mutated. So get for real, gents. You're affected too. You don't have to follow orders. You know, you do not have to follow orders or make ridiculous judgments. That's my message to them. So you're exactly right. Camouflage. And what's interesting is that that column of hot air coming out of Fukushima straight up into the sky acts as a pivot. So the cold weather goes north of there, and the cold wind, and it pivots around that Fukushima column of hot air, which seems to be controlling all of the weather effects across the middle and the western Pacific. It seems to be just commandeered. All the winds, all the typhoons are going up in that direction. We see the discharges going down into the Philippine Trench, causing massive typhoons there too. But Tokyo, alarming reading coming right off not only the northern Japan, but also the Pacific Trench off Fukushima. You know that the waterborne, the water releases are putting radiation right on the surface of the water. This wind is picking it up and depositing it right into one of the most densely populated metropolitan areas in the world, and the site of the 2020 Olympics is just being inundated. The readings are alarming. You sent me some readings from a Japanese woman there in her garden. There's bioaccumulation effects of past radiation. Yep. About 3 millisieverts. Yep. Unconscionably high readings, which would be the equivalent to living inside inside the compound of a nuclear plant in downtown Tokyo. This is extremely alarming, and if that was the only exposure people had temporarily, it would be terrible. But the fact that there is this, ongoing radiation in the air, the water, their food, and through every bit of contact they have with the external world, they've got radiation. And for this snowstorm now, just to pile it on. The radiation is being piled on. Okay, they're taking readings on the surface that's being piled on. If you take it at every level, it could be incredibly higher. And when that melts, some of that will wash into the sewers. Others will just sink into the earth, be absorbed by the plants, and also stick to the houses, to the roofs, the walls of houses, and so on. To people's shoes, to people's clothing, to your laundry if it's outside, to everything, to your car. You're going to track it into your car. All that radiation, much of that is going to remain and just increase the deadliness of living, not just in Tokyo, but across all of, northern, not just northern and central Japan. Northern and central Yamanashi Prefecture is pretty far down. That's down by Mount Fuji. It's pretty far down. So vast areas, massive contamination. Japan is, I would say, unlivable at this time. Unless it's normal to live inside levels which would be in the confines.
In the confines of a low-level radioactive dump, which is what Tokyo has become. And he said 3 millisieverts. It was 3 microsieverts, 3 point something in that garden. And that's accumulative after 3 years. The snow wasn't very bad at all. It was new. And it came from the east. It didn't come from Fukushima. Actually, it came from the west side, moved around. But it originally came from the east. Now, that snow piled up, biggest snows they've had. And the big question is, should Tokyo... Well, let me rephrase that. The question ought to be, and what Yoichi's point was, and he made it very well, should Tokyo be evacuated, at least of its children? And there are very strong arguments to be made. The answer is yes. We'll see what happens. Yoichi, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. I mean, I was one of the people, if you remember, very early on pushing for decontamination. People should stand and fight against this thing and even sacrifice their lives if they have to save the land for their grandchildren. Not for their children, but their grandchildren. We've been blown away. We've been swept away in this tsunami of radiation. That argument does not hold anymore. People have got to look at the DNA of whether you're Japanese or a foreign expat there. You can't go on like this because you will become an accomplice in your own cancer, in the destruction of your children, in the mutation of any embryos that you might create with your spouse, okay? You cannot, I think, in any moral, good conscience, remain there and be party to this disaster. And especially, you know, something like an Olympics cannot be an excuse for people to have civic pride and hold the line. We're threatening the lives of everyone who's going to go there, for the planning, the coaches, the organizers, the advertisers, everybody who's going to come over, not to mention the athletes. This is just unconscionable. Well, the other thing is also Professor Wilcox. He gave a reading. He showed a reading in Tokyo that's similar to one he found in Michigan. Michigan, if you recall, is far north enough in the United States to have been hit by that first wave, Fukushima, or first Zenma Pass, and then later cesium, okay?
Right.
Also, there's apparently been a big problem at the Enrico Fermi nuclear plant on Lake Erie. That in 2010, it was hit by a tornado. The reactor suffered a direct hit from a tornado. The Environment Agency and the Department of Energy said there was some damage to the plant, but no nuclear releases. No, the readings in Michigan, Upper Michigan, much too high for the Fermi plant, not just the major releases. And then on top of that, radiation from Fukushima, because it is far north enough. Significant parts of the Midwest are not only radioactive in those past incidents. Right now, that Arctic jet stream is dropping radiation down from the Arctic region, which Fukushima really bombarded, down into the Midwest as far as the southern states. Situation dire, serious. Now, there's no part of Canada that is not affected. People have got to start waking up. You know, they've got to snap out of this paralysis and start measuring things. And luckily, I think your call, Jeff, to get people out there with dosimeters is taking some effect. And whenever people are doing that, they're finding alarming and dangerous levels in Japan and in California and along the West Coast. People in the Midwest can't just sit there and assume they're far enough away. In fact, no. The Fukushima has massive tentacles of reach. And I'm sure by now, Europe, with the dips in the jet stream that hit, we're looking at England, we're looking at Germany, we're looking at France, we're looking all the way to Russia, we're looking all the way over to Turkey, be clobbered by radiation. Lower levels, of course, but still
cumulative
enough to bring about concern and for people there to take some sort of safety measures against radiation.
And all accumulating all the time. That's what we got to remember.
Yeah. And the other thing that came to my mind is that the reason we do not have any kind of Geiger counters, any public system of alarming people with radiation, you remember in the Cold War, there was a whole defense system in which there were, remember the big yellow Geiger counters?
Absolutely. They were in every town, every city. They had a civil defense shelter. They had preparations. They had food. They had all kinds of things. Nothing now. There is no civil defense.
When the nuclear industry began to spread to every state, suddenly the civil defense, and this was during the Cold War, when Russian ballistic missiles were larger, faster than ever, suddenly the civil defense system was shut down. They did not want radiation monitoring in every town and village across the United States. Okay? That's why there are no readings now, because the spread of the domestic nuclear industry, they knew the stuff was spilling over, okay? And they didn't want the public to find out. That's why, as people get outdoors in their various communities, they're going to find some older hotspots, and on top of that, new layers from Fukushima. Not just one layer from Fukushima, new layers from Fukushima. Situation bad is building up. When we talk about new layers, these layers are building up levels of radiation all across North America. People have got to start acting and stop being paralyzed by the fight. You cannot be frightened of this stuff. Even like Professor Wilcox, myself, we march into Fukushima, inside the exclusion zone. Sure, it's threatening. Sure, it's high risk. Sure, we don't want to die. We're not suicidal. But we've got to do that in the name of the public interest, scientific inquiry, in the name of knowledge, so the facts get out to people. I hope other people realize try to take safety measures, but you got to get it. And it's a lot easier in the United States where you can wear gloves and all. It's not so humid in Fukushima, where you can have more protective clothes, where you have the luxury of a car. Whereas in Japan, if we use a car, we'll be tracked and stopped and harassed and all that. We have to march in there on foot, expose ourselves completely. You have tremendous advantages still in North America to do these readings at much lower risk than the risk that people like Richard Wilcox and I and others there in Japan face, okay? So there is no excuse. There's absolutely no excuse for people not to get postal-meters and guider counters and get out in the field and start measuring around.
I've asked them to do that.
Very bad winter. This is a very bad winter.
They've got to go out and establish their background readings now so they can monitor as this thing changes in the next 2 to 6, 7 months when the water becomes radioactive on the coast.
Yeah. Absolutely. We got to get that baseline, and you can find places, let's say, on south-facing hills, lower readings that will give you a better reading of pre-Fukushima conditions. The very low readings, let's say, behind a rock or behind a hill. That's on the south side, on the southeast side, you could probably get a fairly good base reading. It may be a little bit higher than it actually was, but at least it's a base reading
close to pre-Fukushima. Yeah.
It's not going to last forever. I think after this winter, that's going to be gone. Everything is going to be, once the snow melts, all of that water is going to wash everywhere, and we will lose that reading. So this is a winter where people must take action. If they don't, you become party to your own self-destruction and the annihilation of future generations.
I want to thank,
you become a culprit, not a victim. You become a culprit, not
Correct.
a victim. If you just do not take action, if you refuse and just sit there and do nothing, you are a party to this ongoing disaster, and certainly not a victim, and certainly not a fighter against it. So people have to be somewhat heroic, summon the courage to get out there.
I agree. You've got to put your body on the line here. Dave, I want to thank Dave again, who went on the beach and found that originally contaminated beach at Surfers Beach. He has put up a wonderful radiation station. You can see it live. It's right there in the radiation box on the right-hand side of Rense.com. You'll find it there. Now, there's also something new. For the first time in a long time, UC Berkeley has released a study about readings. It's not as thorough as the other ones used to be. It's kind of a simple, superficial, from what I can gather. But they did find 3,500 picocuries per kilogram of cesium on a roadside in California, which is a very interesting little dump. Cattle feed in California at a dairy farm had 300 picocuries per kilogram of radioactive cesium. So they're beginning to find, and where they look, they will find. That's the simple truth.
Yeah. This is, and there, I'm sure their readings are very conservative, very moderate, and their general readings, they're not like little, micro hotspots.
They were doing some good readings a year and a half ago.
Yeah. I mean, you can dilute these readings by doing more general, larger distance.
Well, look, Yoichi, look what the EPA did. They did the same thing the Japanese government did, but they bested the Japanese by raising these so-called safe exposure levels up to as high as, in some cases, 27,000 times higher than they were. So this is nuts.
Yeah, this is not governance. It's misgovernance. It is absolutely, it's not just irresponsible.
No, it's criminal.
It should be criminal. Yeah. And I hope at some point when the world wakes up that the bureaucrats and the politicians who authorize this stuff be brought before court on charges of something more than neglect, but, of responsibility, failing in their duty to the public, to inform the public of the lethal risk that people face, especially children, especially mothers, infants, and elderly people. I hope the criminal charges are brought against these people and justice is meted out, because this is just unconscionable, and the rest of us have got to take a much stronger, much tougher position.
What really is particularly irritating to me is what we have, you have been doing and I've been doing for 3 years this next month. Mm-hmm. They are now beginning to admit that TEPCO has completely bungled any reasonable effort from physics, from nuclear professionals to handle the situation at Fukushima Daiichi. They've blown it. Well, they've blown it to the extent now that we're looking at a potential extinction event.
Yeah, exactly the point. The situation far, far worse than anything suggested. And TEPCO itself admits its absolute total failure to report the significant, the real numbers, the much higher numbers behind this contamination. And the severity of the meltdown, the speed of the meltdown, the size of the meltdown, the fact that the Korean escaped very early on, the fact that nothing was done to contain it, that quite the opposite, everything was done to flush it out into the Pacific. And even that has failed. I mean, Korea's still in the ground. All they did was flush a lot of radionuclear. And the beggar thy neighbor policy. They burned off the incineration, one thing after the other, to export radiation rather than to contain it. It is really a violation of international law. And if the international law is not there on nuclear, why do we need international law? The World Court had better start moving themselves and face the music here.
All that radioactive material that Japan has burned, they have basically put it into the air, and much of it has been shoved off on the rest of the world. That's what they were doing.
Yeah, and one thing I must say, if there is one government that's not culpable in this cover-up, if one government's policy has been anti-nuclear, they'll then show it by going to the International Court of Justice and calling Japan, the government in Japan, on the carpet for poisoning the entire world and setting off something that's going to kill the entire human race. Take it to the World Court of Justice, to the International Court. Otherwise, why do we ever need international law and international court? Let's see if all the global elites hang together and hang themselves, or if one government anywhere dares step forward for justice for the people of this planet.
We shall see.
All the species of this planet.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you, my friend. Take care of yourself. We'll talk to you next week.
Yes, sir.
Yoichi Shimatsu, and just a marvelous, heroic individual, and our friend Professor Wilcox, and so many others there. Okay, and this Wednesday night we'll be talking to Dick Allgaier and Hitomi about Fukushima as well. We'll get another view. She has been in touch with some of the workers at the plant, and it'll be interesting to see what she has to say Wednesday. All right, we'll be right back. Tomorrow night, 21 hours. It'll go by quickly. Take care. Talk soon.